Yes.
You sure?
Let me think about
Sure,
it.
Bob.
Let me check my book on
Yes. All right. Now call to order this meeting of the Gettysburg Area School District Board of School Directors on this Monday, January 7th, 2019. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct the business of the Gettysburg Area School District. Public comment is welcome, and issues will be referred to the appropriate board, committee, or administrator. Please know that issues will not be debated in this public meeting. Comments will be summarized in the official board minutes, which will be available by contacting the business office. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. Thank you. Mrs. Collins, all board members are present except for Kathleen Pratt, who is excused tonight. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good evening, everyone, especially the 6 candidates that have applied for the 2 board vacancies. Thank you for taking the time to apply for the open seat on the Gettysburg Area School District Board of Education. The interview process is straightforward. After a short introduction, each member of the board will ask you a question. You may make a short closing comment. Following your interview, you are welcome to stay here in the boardroom. We do ask that once your interview has concluded, that you refrain from any additional comment. Initially, each board member will vote for 2 candidates. Candidates with at least 4 votes will be elected. If necessary, the board will cast another vote in order to break ties or result in a candidate receiving at least 4 votes. Board members will cast the number of votes equal to the number of open positions. A clear majority of the board selects applicants to fill the vacant seats. It is the board's intention to have the applicants sworn in tonight and join the board for the rest of the meeting. Are there any questions from the applicants? All right, hearing none, the interviews will begin here in a few minutes. However, first, to provide a random order, you will draw a number from a box. The applicant drawing 1 will be first, 2 will be second, and 3 will be third, and so on. The first applicant will stay here in the boardroom. The rest of you will leave the boardroom. You will be called when your number is up. One of the 6 applicants is not present tonight. He is out of the country. After we finalized our board questions for all of you, you will all be getting the same questions. We interviewed him, we have him taped, and what order he comes in, what he gets the last number, whatever that is, that's the order that we will play his responses to the board. And the board understand that? Okay. Are we ready? Okay, who is number 1? Okay. You step up to the podium, please. You state your name.
Certainly. Yeah, you can come with me. I'm Steve Harris.
Okay. All right, would you, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll begin the rounds of questions.
Certainly. Basically, I grew up in Massachusetts. From there, I served a bit over 2.5 years at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, in the U.S. Army, then went on to seminary, and then did a career in terms of religious service. And During the course of that, it's the sort of thing is that I did what I started to do in high school, which is, in a sense, multitask in terms of being involved with a variety of different organizations. Those that I submitted included a number of things that were involved with working with nonprofits and governmental agencies that provided services, and again, but as far as I got very familiar with some of the ins and outs in terms of how you try to find working with state agencies, which run the sort of range from providing you with unfunded mandates, and the different organizations, in some cases, were providers. In other cases, were contract agencies that make provision for other agencies as well. I'll stop there and be open to any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. First, school board member is an advocate for public education. What are some ways you could advocate earnestly for public education and especially GASD?
Well, as a board member, I would need to be very careful, as I indicated in my statement, as far as concerned, the recognition that it is that as far as concerned is that as a board member, one needs to be careful not to step on what is being done in terms of either the administration or with those that are in the leadership position as far as the board is concerned. Beyond that, part of the advocacy, as far as I'm concerned, is recognizing that as far as concerns that a school district needs to provide a wide range of services. As one of my friends, who's a former board member in another city, indicated as far as concerns that one of the issues that we have is that the changing climate has meant that school districts now have to provide more sorts of support services for the children that are going through the system. Beyond that, part of that is recognizing the various tensions that we live in terms of a board, both having to make decisions about the rates that we need to charge as a board itself, what may or may not come in from the state, and also the tensions that people live in within a school district in terms of what their financial situation is, and all those things add to that. In the past, I've been an advocate in Franklin County when the board, in my opinion, seemed to be dysfunctional and was determined that it could get away with decreasing a tax base and sort of allowing for the best education available, which meant, in point of fact, not as much education as was necessary. So those are sort of positions. I have been an advocate most of my life, including in the military, when I was in the military. As far as concerned is that one of the things I'm concerned is that there'll be an element of justice in terms of what we do with this transparency. I think those are sort of important features in terms of any sort of board service. Beyond that, part of my experience has been working, as I said, with a wide range of boards in terms of bringing some skills to those positions.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Jim Henderson.
Yes,
What
sir.
are your strengths that would contribute to this school board?
I guess a number of different ones, Jim. It's the sort of thing is my background training was in education by virtue of the work that I've done. It's been involved in education of other sorts. At one point, I was the dean of Christian studies for my diocese. Because I've worked on various boards, I'm familiar with personnel issues. I have some expertise in terms of being able to read a balance sheet, to be able to work on budgets. By the nature of some of my work, it's the sort of thing as I've learned to work with the diversity, recognizing that as far as concerned, because someone might oppose me on one issue, doesn't mean they're going to oppose me in all of them. And I think that's an important recognition that as far as concerns that we don't have to always agree to get a mission done.
Back to me. If appointed, how do you see yourself working with other board members on important issues or matters?
Well, I know that there are certain restrictions that we have in terms of having large gatherings as far as concerned, but certainly being able to work together, to do the adequate research that's necessary, to expect the same thing from the administration, that as far as concerned is that we work within important guidelines. It's important for us to provide services, both short range and long range. It's the sort of thing is that one of the things I've learned is that as far as concerned is in terms of maintenance, there's a time when you repair a roof, and there are times when you need to replace a roof. And at a certain point, you don't wait for it to begin to fully leak to replace it. So a lot of it has to do with working with whatever committees I might be asked to serve on. During the time when I was in Waynesboro, early on, I worked on a review of the curriculum in the history department, for instance. So it's the sort of thing is that I understand that kind of review. Mount Alton, when I was working part-time as a chaplain, I was involved with the faculty long-range planning. It meant we had to negotiate around the finished product to the main campus wanted us to provide.
Thank you.
I have a next question.
Sure.
If you are selected for the board, what time commitments do you have that will compete for your time?
At this point in time, it's the sort of thing is I have a couple of meetings a month as well. I have one meeting a month at this point as far as trying. It's third or fourth Tuesday of the month, but as a board member, that would be something that I would be prepared to sacrifice. Other than that, it's the sort of thing is that as a retired clergyman, there are times in which I could get called on to fill in for somebody else. But one of my pursuits since retirement has been I don't need to be in a pulpit on a Sunday. If they need me in a pulpit on a Sunday, that's a different matter.
Thank you.
Steve, I have the next question. It's actually a two-part question.
Surely.
If appointed, how would you handle requests if approached from either individuals or special interest groups to take action on their behalf? And then secondly, do you foresee any personnel or professional possible conflicts of interest that would need resolved should you be appointed to the board? Most of the time when I get approached about things, it happens to be during church or in between. I don't.
Right. Well, as I say, as far as concerned is that my feeling is that as far as concerned, if somebody approaches me, it's sort of part of the response is that in most cases would be referring it. Beyond that, as far as concerned, in a sense, it all depends. When I was at Tammy Lynn, and the board back in North Carolina, we had an issue that came up in terms of a personnel matter. Much of the board wished to just let it go away because it was going to involve EEO. My recommendation to the board, I get confused sometimes between whether he was the board president or I was the board president, he was the chair, vice versa. But basically, I told him, put down memo for record, record the activities of the individual. During the course of the investigation, information was gathered sufficiently enough so the EO situation was dropped. But a lot of my thing is that as far as there is that I will take issues seriously. I will expect people to be reasonably transparent about what's being offered. At the same time, it's the sort of thing is that my job is not to overstep, but rather to use the system that we have as far as it's, as I indicated in my letter, our job is not to micromanage, but rather to do oversight, appropriate oversight.
Thank you.
I have the next question then. Being a board member is unique in many ways, often not realized until you're actually a board member. Please take a moment and tell us why you seek the appointment to the school board. In other words, why do you really want to serve?
Several different things. Some of it's involved in my family history. So that as far as concerned, my mother was a teacher. She received her master's during the Depression. Then she had me. And as you can imagine, at that point in time, it meant that she could no longer be a teacher. As a result, for most of my young life, I had a mother that was working two jobs, so I understand other people's situation. Because of my undergraduate work in education, I was very much interested in the system of education. When we moved to Pennsylvania, I had two daughters in school, one in what became the middle school, the second one was in the high school. I was interested in, at that time, possibly at some point serving on the school board. However, because of what was going on, my role shifted to advocacy, which may have resulted in some of the changes that went on in the board, which meant that as far as concerned, as we became a bit more progressive. Had the same kind of interest that I've always had there. To be perfectly honest, when it was first announced, I thought about it and sort of stepped back. And then when you all indicated that you did not have any applications, I haven't been doing board work for 2 or 3 years beyond some minor things. And this is an opportunity to serve and use some of the expertise that I didn't have.
Thank you.
If appointed, who are your constituents?
My constituents are, among others, first of all, the children of the school district, their parents, our teachers, all of you, and also the administration. It's the sort of thing is, and my recognition is that that means that quite often we have a sort of tangled situation in terms of doing decision making, because as far as concerned is that one group or another may be offended by what we do. From my experience in high school, as far as concerned is that my experience is that as far as concerned is that one of the most important groups in that grouping, quite often are the high school students, being able to have an opportunity to be able to voice their own concerns because it's part of their own civics lesson.
I have the last question.
Okay.
What do you believe is the largest challenge facing the Gettysburg School District, and why do you feel you are qualified to help us solve that challenge?
From my own perspective, I always think that the largest one, beyond being sure that as far as concerned as the programmatic things go forward in an appropriate manner, is having the financial resources to be able to manage that. It's the sort of thing is that I recognize in the state of Pennsylvania, when you sit down and try to form a budget each year, you're working with the issue that many of us have, which is, first of all, is that from year to year, there's a cost of living expense. And you might think that when you sit down at a board, you sort of say, well, cost of living. This past year, as far as Social Security is concerned, the increase was 2.8%. The difficulty is that if the state does not provide their equal share, you all are facing anything from 2.8 to 4.2 to 5.6. By the same token, the members of the community have, generally speaking, not received a 5.6 increase in salary. So how do you work the tension in terms of that? And as far as that, to be honest, I think at times other governmental agencies resolve the problem by, in some cases, reducing the revenue and then sort of saying, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, and the other. My recognition is that as far as concerned in the school district, we need to maintain the fund balance, not only to take care of emergencies, but also because as far as concerned, especially in non-election years, you may have a delay in terms of what you can expect from the state, which means that you have to have something to draw on. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're using a line of credit for things that you should avoid as much as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Okay, and so on. Go out there, right?
No, you may stay.
Oh, okay.
The second is
Oh,
Mr. Hershey.
Mr. Hershey. All right, our second candidate is Mr. Hershey, as we said, was Tate. Questions were asked earlier. So, Andrew?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hershey, for your interest in being a board member, Gettysburg Area School District. First question, a school board member is an advocate for public education. What are some ways you can advocate earnestly for public education in the Gettysburg Area School District?
Well, the first thing my philosophy would help to dictate is that I think we need to educate the whole child, whether that child is a kindergartner, a middle school age student, or a senior in high school. Each one has their own needs, and we need to make sure that as a school district that we're meeting them in the classroom, as well as the coursework that we're offering them, the co-curricular activities that we have for them. So I guess maybe the best way I could phrase it is I would try to be the best cheerleader for the Gettysburg School District and to offer all those things that students need to be successful and to be prepared for whatever the next phase might be in their life. So I think that's where my background is strong, that I've got the experience at all those levels as a classroom teacher, as a building administrator, and then the last 8 years as a school superintendent. So I think I appreciate what parents are looking for. You know, they want the best experiences for their child, and hopefully can get that with the least amount of taxes. So it's a juggling act, and you know, I have that experience in New Jersey for the 8 years that I was a superintendent, so I think I could duplicate that in Gettysburg, especially with the number of years that I also have in the Pennsylvania school systems.
Thank you very much.
The next question is, what are your strengths that you would contribute to this school board?
Well, I think I could provide a perspective of what the educator sees as needs. Having been that school superintendent, as I shared with you earlier, I think I understand the needs of parents. Obviously, they're looking for their children to be able to, when they finish secondary school, to go into whatever field they want to and prepared. So the thing that excites me about the Gettysburg School District is all the co-curricular choices that we have, and the technology courses and the vocational courses that would allow students to get that. But again, the key is balancing what parents' needs are and what students' needs are, and make sure that teachers have the resources to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Hershey, if appointed to the board, how do you see yourself working with the other board members on important matters?
Well, I think, you know, the key is you've got to be a good listener. You can't jump in there and just say, this is what I want to do, or this is what I think is best. It doesn't matter which school district you're in, and I've been in a number of them. Each of the makeups of a board and the personalities of the individual members, and then the personality of the board as a whole, need to work together cooperatively. And I think I've learned that over the years, that you know, the key first is being a good listener, then sharing what you think will work from your experiences and the personalities of the board members that you're working with. And you know, I think I would be someone who could contribute in a number of areas that the school board might be looking for direction or just for ideas.
Thank you.
If you're selected for the board, Mr. Hershey, what time commitments do you have that will compete for your time?
Well, as I said in my letter, which I had labeled retirement, I am now at a point where I believe that I can contribute as a board member a great deal of time and effort, and would be willing to do that. Sitting here in Mexico and talking to you, this is a rarity. We've never gone on vacation for more than 2 weeks. So being down here for a month just what we've already done today, I'm really excited with, but if I get chosen for the school board, you could certainly count on me reverting back to a person who doesn't take vacations all that often. It would be available. I certainly have the energy to put into it, the time to put into it, and the expertise, I believe. So I think I would be a good choice for your board.
Thank you.
Mr. Hershey, the next question is two parts, so I'll separate it out and just ask it separately.
Okay.
The first is, if appointed, how would you handle requests if approached from either individuals or special interest groups to take action on their behalf?
Well, the first thing you have to make clear is that you're one of 9, and you certainly don't mind getting suggestions and ideas from any taxpayer, any parent, any member of the Gettysburg School District. But the key is that you can't commit to something without sharing it with the board and without getting board approval, and from the right person on the board providing that approval or having had that discussion. You know, I may be the person chosen to head a particular committee, and therefore maybe the person that people come to for that particular background that I may have, or that particular interest that the parent may have, or community member. But I certainly wouldn't commit the board to anything without first sharing it with them and then the board making that decision. And I would make sure the person making the request is well aware of the way I operate.
Additionally, do you foresee any personal or professional possible conflicts of interest that would need resolved should you be appointed to the board?
You know, I thought about that, and I think one of the benefits of having been in the area now for 7 years, looking at what I accomplished when I was involved in the board of directors at Lake Heritage, I don't think I've had enough time to infuriate anybody about decisions that I've made. I have not made any commitments to anybody that I think would impede upon my ability to make good decisions. So, no, I don't see any, I can't think of anything, and I have spent time because I sort of expected that that would be a question, and I don't think that there is anything that I've done or accomplished that people would find fault with, or that I got myself in hot water, so to speak, with anyone.
Thank you. Being a board member is unique in many ways, often unrealized until you are a member. Please take a moment to tell us why you seek the appointment to the school board. In other words, why do you want to serve?
Good question. My wife asked that same one. Now, I think with all the experience that I have, and again, I refer back to the information, the letter, so to speak, that I provided in my resume. I've done everything in education except been a board member, and I think that would be perfect for me to finish my interest in my educational experiences and to share that with other board members and with the community. So I guess the reason that I'm interested is, one, I now have time to do it. 2, I still have that commitment to education. I have that commitment to teachers, to students, to taxpayers. So I think it's the perfect time to be a board member because I am retired and I do have the time to invest in it. But that I would also look at it as it's a perfect way to finish the circle of education, so to speak.
Thank you.
Mr. Hershey, if you were appointed, who would be your constituents?
Clarify that a little bit for me. I mean, everybody that is living in the Gettysburg area school district are considered my constituents. So I'm not sure where you're going with this question.
I think it's just it's if appointed, who are the constituents? I think that you answer. I think that you provided an answer.
Okay.
Actually, this is the last question, Mr. Mr. Hershey. What do you believe is the largest challenge facing our district, and why do you feel you're qualified to help us solve that challenge?
Well, I think, reading the Gettysburg Times over the 6+ years that I've been here now, being part of Rotary and hearing discussions on education, being part of Lake Heritage and the governmental part and the concerns of parents or residents in Lake Heritage, the biggest concern usually is taxes, and I'm usually pretty good at telling people what an advantage they have with the Gettysburg School District and how good it is that they're fortunate to have that. But I would look at the challenges of being on the board as something that would stimulate me and something that I think that could, be beneficial to serving on the board, and hopefully people would see that I've got what it takes to be good. Now, I have to ask you if you can tell me whether I answered that question or not, or whether I missed the point on it.
Well, I believe you've got the point.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. That concludes the formal questions for.
Hey, Mr. Head. Okay, good evening, Roberta. Welcome. To start with the questioning, if you would just state a little bit who you are, a little bit about you, and then I'll have the first question.
Okay. My husband and I moved here from New Jersey about 12 years ago, and I've been involved in education quite a bit. I had a degree in music ed, did tons of volunteering and tons of substituting. I would substitute all different levels, but generally would not do chemistry or PE, because I didn't want anything blowing up, and I didn't know how to spot kids on equipment. So I did other and long-term stuff, of course. Education, I think is probably certainly one of the top 3 things that we need to provide for the next generation. And I feel very strongly about that. I'm very interested in policy making. I think a good policy is crucial. It gives expectations and limitations and cuts down on questions so that there isn't any gray lines. I used to be on the Board of Education of Eastern Christian School Association in New Jersey when our girls were in that school. And that's all.
All right, I'll start with the first question, which you sort of answered a little bit, I believe. A school board member is an advocate for public education. What are some ways you could advocate earnestly for public education in the Gettysburg Area School District?
I think one of the best ways is to research what we're discussing and make sure that we have the facts. I'm a hands-on board member. I like to be in schools. I like to support the administration. I like the kids to know that we're supporting them and to get their views. I'm conservative, and I think as far as the town goes, I think we need to keep a very positive attitude towards our education. But I think it's important to listen to different people and their ideas.
Thank you.
What are your strengths that would contribute to this school board?
Research for different things about what other districts are doing, and of course policy making and so forth, and being involved with the kids, being involved with the staff, finding out the issues, being kind of a liaison. I think experience is one of the things that I come up with. And I like things to be, as all of you do, up front. And all of you, from all the things I've read and times I've been here, I think that's definitely true. I would not be part of this if I didn't believe that.
Thank you.
Back to me, Roberta. If appointed, how do you see yourself working with other board members on important matters?
What's not to work on? I mean, I'm sorry, I think it's crucial. I think the way to work on things is to discuss them and to hear the different points of view, find out what's going on, what the ideas are, and what the problems are. And then check, do we have any written policies on that already? How do we address these? What are the solutions? I think it's crucial that we all talk together, either email or phone or something. I don't believe in just one person doing something and everybody else. And this is the other reason why I applied here, because I don't see any rubber stampers here. I don't see any of you being just a rubber stamp, that will rubber stamp anything, and I appreciate that.
You.
I have the next question.
Sure.
Roberta, if you're selected for the board, what time commitments do you have that will compete for your time?
Well, I'm retired, so I don't have a lot of time commitments already scheduled. So I would have a lot of time.
Thank you.
Roberta, I have a two-part question.
Sure.
If appointed, how would you handle requests and approach from either individuals or special interest groups to take action on their behalf? And secondly, do you foresee any personal or professional possible conflicts of interest that would need resolved should you be appointed on the board? In my experience, I usually get asked questions at church, probably the most, but possibly in the grocery store or wherever.
I would never speak for the board. I would never answer for the board, and I probably would not speak on my own, because I don't think any one individual. I would take the request, I would ask what it's about, I would ask them if I could contact them later and find out the issues. I would talk to the administrator, and I would talk with other board members. I don't feel that I would be comfortable in that. And the other part was?
The other part was, do you foresee any personal or professional possible conflicts of interest?
No, not at all. My husband's a battlefield guide, so, and I want nothing to do with that, so.
Thank you.
Hello. Being a board member is unique in many ways, often not realized until you are a member. Please take a moment and tell us why you seek the appointment to the school board. In other words, tell us why you really want to serve.
I serve because I think this community has a great education. I think it's gotten a bad rap from some people, and I think we owe it to our students to offer the best that we can for each student. Each student has potential. I don't think they all have potential to go to Ivy League schools, and I don't think they should. But I'm really excited the fact that we offer tech programs and other things. So I feel that it would be a privilege to me to be here. And I would like, obviously, to work with you folks.
Thank you.
Hi, Roberta. I have the next question. If appointed, who would be your constituents?
Well, I would bounce everything off the board members. I would bounce everything off the committee. My constituents that I would be worried about would be the kids, and as like the kids in church. I don't have any children in the school. I have no grandkids, so that's not an issue for me. That would not be a conflict in any way. I think the whole community is a constituent. I think it's something that needs to be everybody's concern, and I think everybody needs to take a piece of it. And I'm disturbed by a lot of the parents that don't take responsibility for their students' education. And that bothers me. That's something I would like to see, a value of education higher in the community.
believe is the largest challenge facing our district, and why do you feel you are qualified to help us solve that challenge?
I think geographically, a lot of the challenge is because so many miles that are covered. And I think communication is the way that's going to continue to close that gap. And I think the other thing I said is the parents not perceiving education as important enough for their children. There is approximately, I forget, it was a 2007 census that was done by the U.S. They take the 2010 census and then they add what their perspectives are. But if you go on the censusbureau.gov, the 2007, I believe they said approximately, I think it's 13 or 14% of our community do not even have high school educations. That scares me. And that scares me for our students as well. To know that A, their parents don't have it, and B, that their parents may not want them to have it or can. That's frightening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. All right, Mr. Net, we were ready for. Good evening, Mr. Reed.
Hi.
Hi. We'll start, if you would start by just giving us a little brief background of who you are, a little bit of background.
Okay. My name's Leon Reed. I live in Cumberland Township. I've lived in the Gettysburg area for 3.5 years. I made most of my career in the Washington area, working on Capitol Hill as a defense consultant. And then the final 10 years I worked, I was a teacher of English as a second language and U.S. history for the Prince William County, Virginia school system. We're very happy we're living in Gettysburg. I live with my wife, 4 cats. And while I'm taking some time for retirement, I also volunteer at SCAP and at the National Park Visitor Center. And my wife and I write in our spare time military history.
Thank you. And I have the first question for you. Mr. Reed, a school board member is an advocate for public education. What are some ways you could advocate earnestly for public education and Gettysburg Area School District?
I've been a strong believer in public education my whole life. My kids were educated in the Montgomery County, Maryland public schools. I've worked with youth my whole life, and I work a lot with the public. I interact with other volunteers at SCAP, at the Visitor Center, which of course is more tourists than local residents. I strongly believe in public schools. I've particularly been an advocate for students with special needs. My primary focus, of course, was English language learners, but also special ed students, gifted students, students that aren't headed for college. I think communication is a vital role that a school system and a school board has to carry out. That would include public advocacy. The webpage is increasingly important for any government organization. I work with a private organization, a deep local GFA chapter, and have been the spearhead of developing their webpage. And I think communicating that way, pushing more information out at the public is a very important way to maintain communications, particularly with the parents and prospective parents. This obviously is a competitive school situation. Parents have a lot of choice, so it's very important, I think, to stay in touch with families in town and press the benefits of education with the Gettysburg schools.
Thank you.
Mr. Reed, are your strengths that would contribute to this school board?
I've served on many boards, no government boards. I was obviously a staff of the Senate committee. I've always worked well in small groups. I've always understood that to get anything done, people have to work together and agree on things. Certainly there are areas of particular interest to me. One thing I learned serving on boards is the critical importance of financial oversight, really watching the books. I was the head of, we've been told, the largest youth soccer club in the country, Montgomery Soccer. I served on their board for 20 years and was president. And during my time as president, we had impressed strongly on us by a financial advisor the critical importance to board members of making sure that the books were in order.
Okay, Mr. Reed, if appointed, how do you see yourself working with other board members on important matters?
I've always worked well in small groups. I'd obviously need to get to know people. A lot of the work on committees and that I'd look forward to eagerly. I think that my history working on committee staffs, leading business organizations, working on nonprofit boards, I've always been able to show an ability to work together with small groups and get things done.
Thank you.
I have the next question. If you're selected for the board, what time commitments do you have that will compete for your time? And you may have mentioned some, please.
I have current activities. Obviously, the school board would be priority number one, and other things would have to be adjusted. My current commitments, I volunteer one morning and one afternoon a week at SCAT, and one afternoon a week at Park Visitor Center. During the season, I work a couple mornings a week, like May, June, July, August, guiding tours at the Jenny Wade House, but the time requirement for the board would supersede any of those things.
Thank you.
Leon, I have a two-part question. If appointed, how would you handle requests of approach from either individuals or special interest groups to take action on their behalf? And secondly, do you foresee any personal or professional possible conflicts of interest that would need resolved should you be appointed to the board? And as I shared with the others, usually when I get approached, it's at the grocery store or in church or something about some issue.
Yeah. I think it's important to listen to people. The structure of the question, as I remember it, there was a phrase about special intervention or assistance or something. A parent suggesting your curriculum, you don't pay enough attention to the Civil War. I think that you give them a polite answer and discuss it as an individual with them. A parent who says, I think my student should be in gifted education program, you say, well, you need to talk to the administrators. That's not something we get involved with, but I understand that being a public official, you're certainly going to be contacted. And it's I think, just on a human relations level, very important to listen respectfully suggestion, and unless they are asking for some kind of official action, which you refer to the appropriate office, you have a polite discussion with them and consider their views. And conflict of interest, I'm sorry you asked that. I don't think so. The only real commercial interest I have, the books I write, for the most part, for now, I'm self-publishing, so I have what I give a little more dignity than it probably deserves. I call a publishing company, but I don't see, it's books about monuments at Gettysburg and Revolutionary War soldiers, so I don't anticipate trying to sell it to the school system. So I don't think there's any conflicts that I have.
Thank you.
I have the next question. Being a board member is unique in many ways, often not realized until you actually are a member. Please take a moment and tell us why you seek appointment to the school board. In other words, tell us why you really want to serve.
Ever since I worked on Capitol Hill, I've always thought public service was a very important obligation of people. I've never run for office, but I've been involved with public service and community service my whole life. Organizations from soccer clubs to national parks to community food banks wouldn't run simply with the efforts of full-time professional staff. You need, citizens who are stepping forward to help out. In every one of the organizations that I'm involved with, I believe that the collection of volunteers do vital work without which the organization couldn't succeed. Public schools, obviously, are the bedrock of our democracy. We don't have an educated public and an educated electorate without, effective and efficient public schools. And I'd like to do my part to help make sure that the Gettysburg school system remains a really top-notch school system.
Thank you.
Leon, I have the next question. If appointed, who would be your constituents?
My constituents. I think there's I can't make that singular, I don't think. The parents obviously are vital stakeholders. They deserve, and of course, much of this is interaction with the administration, not the school board, but they deserve visibility into their child's education. They deserve input into their child's education, so I would think parents are vital. I think the teachers are too, though. My experience as a teacher was, I worked for years in support of the military, and I saw military officers, the new commanding general always had new initiatives, but the old general's initiatives were gone. It was a nice two-way flow. My experience as a teacher was there were always new requirements. The old requirements never seemed to go away, though. The resources given to teachers relative to their workload, I think they're also a vital constituency. Probably the main constituency would be the school system itself. Our job is to make sure that the school system operates efficiently and effectively, so I'd probably put the school system number one.
I have a last question.
Okay.
What do you believe is the largest challenge facing the Gettysburg School District, and why do you feel you are qualified to help solve that challenge?
one I find myself thinking about the most, probably the main challenge always is school finance. I find myself thinking a lot about safety and security. We went through, I mean, obviously there are things you can do at a 2,500 student high school where I taught at 1,100s, you know, a high school less than half the size, you know, you probably don't have the scale for, but I observed and participated in some committees dealing with safety and security. I think that's an important issue for the schools to deal with, obviously curriculum as well. But I have strong opinions about educational issues from my experience as a practitioner. You know, I've been involved with public policy, so I know how the public policy system works, and I think working with other members of the board, I could help participate in a lot of these issues.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you.
seat.
Thank you.
Good evening, Alice.
Good
How are
evening.
you tonight?
I'm good, how are you?
Great. Would you start out by just sharing a little bit about yourself, your background maybe?
Sure, yeah. My name is Alice Broadway, and it's nice to see some of you again. I know I became interested in the school board position a while ago, and saw the vacancies open in the newspaper and came checked out at the last school board meeting just to see kind of what was happening. And having run for this position before, I feel very invested in the school board receiving the best candidates possible to fill these vacancies, and I believe that I am one of those candidates. For my background, I have been involved in education as a practicing teacher, starting in Massachusetts, the New Bedford Public School District. And when I finished my employment there, I moved back to Gettysburg because I really missed this community and the people here. And of course, the strong support for public education, wanted to kind of be a part of that. I taught in the Gettysburg Montessori Charter School in town and established a rigorous music program there. And then as a result of that position, kind of have that inside knowledge of the charter school system and how it impacts the public schools and school district. And then they moved buildings and restructured their programs a little bit, and then I was left looking for another job. Found it in the Mechanicsburg Area School District, which is where I currently teach and have been teaching for the past 3 years. And I'm committed to continuing to teach there for many years to come. And I say this to indicate that I am not going anywhere during this position and that I'm committed to the full extent of the interim period. For Mechanicsburg, I also student taught in that district as a student at Gettysburg College, and studying education. As part of that program, I had to do 180 hours of observation and field work, the majority of which was done in the Gettysburg Area School District. I went into every single elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, observing teachers and working with the area teachers in those schools. Through my experience teaching in schools and also studying education, I became very interested in questions about policy and current teaching practices and kind of the decisions that school boards can make that impact the teaching and learning in the day-to-day classroom. And that led me to pursue a master's degree in education at Michigan State University. As a part of that program, able to look more at educational policy and also engage in current up-to-date discourse on education. And I've also had the opportunity to conduct research in the field of education and present research on teaching and learning at state, national, and international conferences. And I kind of present that narrative to you to demonstrate the strengths that I can bring to the board. I'm an asset as a practicing teacher. I'm passionate about studying current educational practices and I have the research skills and presentation experience in education. I think all of those provide a pretty unique perspective on how the decisions that the school board makes impact practicing teachers every day in the classroom.
Okay, thank you, Alice. First question. School board member is an advocate for public education. What are some ways you could advocate earnestly for public education and especially Gettysburg Area School District?
Sure. So being a teacher myself, I spend a lot of time going to a lot of extracurricular programs and witnessing different curricular programs that have things outside of school. As a music teacher, I'm invested already in the music program in Gettysburg and have gone to and attended many concerts there. I can speak very well to the program and strengths that they have. I feel as an advocate in town that I'm constantly spending time talking to other community members about things that the schools are doing or talking about school policy and trying to kind of inform people if they have questions about the strengths of the school district. I also acknowledge that being involved in another school district does not mean that I know everything that happens in the Gettysburg School District, so I enjoy kind of talking to people about the differences there and asking more questions to find out.
What are your strengths that would contribute to the school board?
Sure. I think anybody that knows me knows that I'm a very passionate person, so if I get invested in doing something, that I'm a dedicated member of that team. And I think through coming back to apply to this position again when it opened back up shows that a little bit. I definitely care a lot about the kids in this community, and I've worked with some of them in different music programs throughout the years, and I'm interested in seeing how that kind of focus on them and focus on the community aspect of education can add to the school board and kind of, you know, bringing to light what their needs are that we can address through policies. You're welcome.
Okay, Alice. If appointed, how do you see yourself working with other board members on important matters?
Sure. So in any team, I'm sure there are moments where there are disagreements or people that are passionate about different issues than what you may be. I feel that I'm a very clear communicator and that I can work well with others to compromise when there's maybe some disagreements that happen. But that ultimately the goal there is to be working together in the committee meetings and coming to unified decisions to present to the public. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
I have the next question, Alice. If you're selected for the board, what time commitments do you have that will compete for your time?
That's a very good question. We are all very busy people, and of course we all have full-time jobs outside of this board. However, as indicated before, when I dedicate my time to something, I'm very invested in it. And as an elementary school teacher, I don't have many outside of school commitments for after-school activities. Regardless of if something were to come up, of course, something with my full-time job as a teacher would come first. After that, the school board comes second. It is definitely something I'm interested in and something that I would dedicate my time to and prioritize over other choices that I could fill my time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alice, I have a two-part question.
Sure.
If appointed, how would you handle requests, if approached, from either individuals or special interest groups to take action on their behalf? And secondly, do you foresee any personal or professional possible conflicts of interest that would need resolved should you be appointed to the board? Typically, when I get approached, it's either at the Giant or at the church.
Okay. No, so yeah, that's an interesting comment, Al. So if you're approached by somebody in public, you of course want to be very pleasant and welcoming to them, because we are a public entity to kind of talk with the community about what's happening. However, it is important, like I mentioned before, to present a unified front, and that the school board is working together with the superintendent and others in the school district to make sure that things are happening in an aligned manner. And while we all have our own opinions about what's happening, that's something that we're compromising on, working together. So if somebody approaches me outside of these meetings, that would be an important thing to mention, just saying like, thank you for your feedback and your comments. I don't have a comment at this time, but you are encouraged to attend these board meetings and bring it up to public comment here. Your second part of the question, conflict of interest. I don't foresee myself having any conflict of interest with the school board. I have experience being in the schools here and worked in the past, not for the public schools, but for the sanctioned charter from the board. So I think that that helps provide some insight, but for certain, not a conflict of interest at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I got the next one. Being a board member is unique in many ways, often not realized until you are a member. Please take a moment and tell us why you seek appointment to the school board. In other words, tell us why you really want to serve.
tell you why. Well, so I hope I outlined that a little bit in my first long narrative about myself. However, I'm happy to circle back to a couple things. I think that in general, I'm aware that the work of the school board is providing the foundation for policies and programming decisions that then the school does. And of course, the act of implementing those things directly with students is the work of the administration and the teachers in the school district itself. But I think that from my previous experience in other school districts as well, that's not something that can be done successfully to fulfill the needs of students and families without the support and collaboration of the school board. So I have been becoming increasingly interested over the years at how that is something that I could provide to with my experience and also learn about through being a part of it. I really care a lot about the children and their education in this community and the families, so I think that that's the next step in becoming involved as a community member.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
If appointed, who would be your constituents?
Oh boy. Well, I view my constituents as all of the members of the community. So, like I said, the families involved in the schools and in the town, because the schools are a product of the whole entire community, not just the families involved in schools. And I think that that's the important part about showing the importance of public education in a town, is that everybody is invested in it in different ways, and there's multiple parties to consider when making decisions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have the last question.
Sure.
What do you believe is the largest challenge facing the Gettysburg School District, and why do you feel you are qualified to help us solve that challenge?
I believe that the biggest challenge facing Gettysburg and just school districts in general right now is kind of the pressure coming from higher institutes of education, so like state departments and more like Department of Education. There's a lot of different changes coming down the pike for curriculum, but also for different practices and policies in place for safety in schools. There's a lot of things happening at the higher political level, if you will, that impact schools directly and the things that we can offer students. So you asked me what I view as the most pressing issue, but then what was the second part of that question?
Why do you feel you are qualified to help solve that challenge?
So I do think that despite the fact that the things I feel are big issues are kind of higher administration level things, that it's important before you make any large educational change in policy or practice from the board, that you think about what's happening at the ground level and how that will impact the education in the schools. And that's going back to my idea of being an asset as a practicing teacher. I think it's very important to know, not just in the Gettysburg Area School District, but in my school district and neighboring school districts, what's happening that's working and what's happening that maybe isn't working the way that we originally planned. And that's kind of an important thing to have people aware of to then make positive change when change is needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alice.
Sure.
Good evening, Ken. How are you tonight?
Very well, thank you.
Good. We'd like you to start out maybe by just giving us a brief background, or introducing yourself.
Okay.
My name is Kenneth Kuntz. I've been a resident of the district since 1986, I believe. I have something on the order of 40 years of public service, a variety of venues, principally in emergency services, emergency management, and fire-related activities. Those kinds of events involved a fair amount of teaching, most of which was competency-based skills. I've probably been in one respect or another in public service since graduating college. I've pursued both public and private enterprises in terms of providing public service. In today's world, I'm retired, plenty of time to attend here. But even in that role, I'm a member of a fraternity organization here in town that gives something on the order of $250,000 a year in resources to community assets in need, nonprofits and churches and the like. So my commitment, frankly, in terms of offering services to the board is that I'm a long-time member of the community. I think education should be a transformational kind of activity. I've benefited substantially in my own experience by a lot of different kinds of learning opportunities. And I think it's contingent upon us as a community to try and offer that life-broadening type of experience to folks so they continue to question, they continue to seek answers, and continue to search for opportunities to serve each other and others. So I have value in the community. I have a commitment to this organization. I've served for 4 years prior during the construction of the high school capital construction program. So I understand, as John does, all the myriad of complications go along with that kind of enterprise and endeavor. So with that, I'll entertain your question.
All right, I have the first question.
Sir.
A school board member is an advocate for public education. What are some ways you could advocate earnestly for public education in the Gettysburg Area School District?
I think everything the board does fulfills that obligation. I think individually what you have to do is make education a commitment, look to opportunities for partnership with other entities. I frankly think that there are more ways to embrace community activity in the systems. Takes time and energy and collective activity, but I think the more we do, the better the product our children will be.
Thank you.
And what are your strengths that you contribute to this school?
I have fairly extensive background in personnel management. I've been a labor relations specialist for the federal government for, 4 or 5 years, 4 years, something like that. I've been a union president, so I know how to talk to people that are unionized and try to evoke commonality of approach and language so that people understand their concerns have been heard and their interests are being served. My background in that stretches almost from the beginning of my professional life. Most of the beginning of my personnel-related experience started at West Point in an environment that was very structured, had very strong commitments to morality and ethics, and I've tried throughout my life to continue those values in the exercise of my decision making, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. I wish to serve. I have skills I think I can bring to bear that will facilitate the school board's endeavors, especially in dealing with its own educational staff.
Thank you.
All right, Kenneth, if appointed, how do you see yourself working with other board members on important matters?
I perceive this activity to be one of a collegial nature. I think people need to cooperate and I spent a long time as a labor relations specialist trying to become sophisticated enough in my language to be able to embrace concepts that have substantial complexity and oftentimes emotional attachments. A small example, one time I investigated the Lorch Loss fire in Rhode Island, the Supper Club fire where 100 people died, third largest fire in the United States, third largest life loss fire in the United States. And in subsequent activity to that fire, we were called upon, the fire administration particularly was called upon to explain why there weren't national fire codes for sprinklers. And when you stand in front of a room of 100 people whose relatives have died in a fire that happened in a bar that probably wasn't much larger than maybe the American Legion, okay? And you try to explain to them that in the civics of our nation, ordinances are built at the local level, and, you know, if you want a sprinkler ordinance, you have to adopt those codes locally. My point being that when you try to deal with people that have great emotional frustration with consequence of failure or circumstances they can't appreciate, it takes slow and deliberate discussion to get to a point where they understand the reason the federal government can't do that is we don't have the prerogative, okay? And when you say to people, you know, this is up to you, contacting your local legislatures and your representatives, well, what is this school board? This school board is the opportunity for people in this community to come forward, express their concerns about how their children are attended, how taxpayers on how their money's being spent, and this group ought to be able to deliver cogent, concise, feeling explanations for why we spend the money the way we do and what we're trying to accomplish with those expenditures that come on other people's back, okay? The one thing that this board has an obligation to do is be stewards of funds, all right? I have 40 years of experience in stewardship of public funds, all manner and variety of that, from building buildings like fire stations, using public money, to administering fire prevention programs and the like, using public funds. So I think stewardship, responsibility for the public well-being, that's what this kind of group is supposed to be about, and I hope to share that.
Okay, thank you.
I have the next question. If you are selected for the board, what time commitments do you have that will compete for your time?
I'm retired. School work would certainly not pose any challenge to me in terms of attendance at meetings. Mr. Hunt can bear me out, but I think in the last 4-year hitch, I attended all the meetings, and special sessions, and workshops. I don't think I missed none, except if I was out on fire. So I'm readily capable of doing that. Like I said, I'm a member of a couple of fraternal organizations here in town. They would compete, and there it is.
Thank you.
Ken, I have a two-part question.
Sir.
If appointed, how would you handle requests, if approached, from either individuals or special interest groups to take action on their behalf? And additionally, do you foresee any personal or professional possible conflicts of interest that would need resolved should you be appointed to the board? As I was telling the others, usually when I get approached, it's either at church or at grocery shopping at the Giant.
Well, I think it's the obligation of board members to hear any issue that people present to them in any context. That's a whole lot different than promising somebody an outcome. It's a whole lot different than giving somebody even a conditional assertion that you might agree with them, okay? I think the nature of the board is a deliberative body, and the decisions of the board should be made here, okay? Not on the street and not in collaboration with folks who have special interests. If you'll note on my materials, I don't have any financial interests anywhere. I'm a retired federal employee. I get my check from Office of Personnel Management, and I have no allegiances to anybody or anything else except that flag.
Thank you.
Okay?
Hello. Being a board member is unique in many ways, often not realized until you are a member. Take a moment and tell us why you seek appointment to the school board. In other words, why do you really want to serve?
I have the time and opportunity to do it. I think based on the 4 years I've served previously, I have an appreciation and understanding of the role and responsibility that board members carry. I believe in transparency and commitment to public interest. I'm not afraid to suggest to folks that if they have concerns, they need to bring them here and be voiced, so the 9 people who get to choose how we react to that, hear it from the same source at the same time. So my obligations are to help the board support the educational delivery of this system, provide opportunities that cause children to wonder and explore their world with vigor and hopefully with an eye toward public service. That's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
Certainly will.
I can.
Sir.
If appointed, who would be your constituents?
Well, okay, we got a room full of teachers, administrators, and folks of the educational bent. And I'm probably the only one in the room that's going to say I'm here to represent the taxpayers of this district. I don't have any children in the system. I've never had any children, period. But I believe that our educational systems are the cornerstone of our societal growth. And I would like to be a continuing part of that opportunity here in Gettysburg. I think there's ample opportunity for folks to share their abilities and interests. I think I could serve the board well as I did in the past, and would appreciate that opportunity.
I have a last question.
Sure.
What do you believe is the largest challenge facing the Gettysburg School District? And why do you feel you are qualified to help us solve that challenge?
I think we live in a very complicated world. And I think the thing that deters us more than anything else is oversimplification. I would like to believe that through education, we open people's minds to question their basic assumptions, their absence of information, so they're hungry for more. And anything we can do as a system that would foster those kinds of traits and behaviors on the part of students, it's hard to say. I don't think there's anything I could point to in the system that I think is deficient. Okay, whilst in the room there, I was thumbing through one of the yearbooks, and you see smiling faces. 18 different sports activities we support in turn, and women, collegiate. I think that kind of demonstration of diversity, of affirmation of difference, is something we need more of. And I'd be interested in celebrating any kind of activities that tend to promote that. So that's where we're at, need to be. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our
Thank
questions.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
That concludes the interview portion of the process tonight. The next part will be the election. There are 6 of you. Again, I want to, before we do the voting, you can stay right here. You don't have to leave. I want to, on behalf of the whole board, want to thank you for your interest taking the time to apply. I find it rewarding that at least there were 6 people in the community that wanted to get the job, take over 2 vacancies. There'll be, unfortunately, though, 4 of you won't be seated up here, but I hope that you keep your interest, because in the spring primary, if I'm correct, I think there are 6 seats that will be open for the next election, because most of us either are up for re-election if we choose to run, or we were appointed filling out this term. So hopefully, if you don't make it tonight, that you would be interested enough to run in the primary election. Okay? Given that, we will proceed with the election. I want, Mr. McQuaid, would you just please go over again to make sure that all board members understand how we're going to proceed here?
Sure. I just first remind you, in the school code, in section 315, it's the authority provided there to the school board to fill a vacancy by making an appointment. And there really is no procedure that is set forth there. The only requirement is that a majority, before a person can be seated to fill a vacancy, a majority of the existing or the remaining board members vote for that person. Since there are 7 remaining members of the board, that requires a minimum of 4 votes before a candidate can become a seated board member. I noted that there is no one in the public who has asked to speak on this particular issue, so public comment is going to be held normally later in the agenda. So we can move to this. And as the president read to you, I'll just read it again. Initially, each board member will vote or have the opportunity to vote for 2 candidates. Candidates with at least 4 votes will be seated unless there is the possibility that we'll have 3 people with 4 votes, and then we'll have a tie that we'll have to go to. If necessary, the board will cast another vote in order to break ties or result in a candidate receiving at least 4 votes, and board members will cast the number of votes equal to the number of open positions. That is, the idea is we have 2 open positions. We've done this before as a board, but we've never, I can't recall doing it where we've had more than 1 open position. So it is a little bit different and a little bit awkward, but we have 2 open positions. Therefore, in the initial vote, each person will name 2 people that you want to put forward as a candidate for the open seats. Again, if we, let's say we do hit upon one person in the first vote, but we don't have a clear second choice, then the second vote, of course, each person would only have 1 vote then, because there'd only be 1 open position. So, does anyone have any questions about the proposed procedure?
Just briefly, and I know we spoke about this, so we're not going to require a second. In other words, John Doe is I nominate John Doe. Does it require a second?
Well, it went first, when you're making a nomination under Robert's Rules of Order, a nomination does not require a second.
Okay.
So any member of the board could make a nomination for any office, and in this case for the vacancy, and that nomination is complete when the person makes the nomination without a second.
The fact that we only have 6 present tonight and not 7, does that number of 4 still stand?
The number 4 still stands. if you had 5 here tonight, the number 4 would still stand.
One more question. So in that first round, if we do not have a candidate with 4 votes, then we go to a second round of voting again, or how does that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you just, you either, you continue to vote until you have both seats filled, or you give up and punt it to a later time. Keeping in mind that the board has the right to fill this position, but it's not an exclusive right. Any 10 members, any 10, what they call electors, any 10 residents of the school district could petition the court, and then the court would take jurisdiction. But unless and until that happens, which is a rarity, the board would continue to have the right now or in the future to appoint someone.
So simply stated, that if the president calls on me first, I've got to give 2 names, or should give 2 names, and that is considered my vote.
Yes.
Understand?
I think Kenny's volunteering to go first.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not, and I know you just, well, I think you just rigged that.
All right. We ready then? Does any board members have questions for Bob? Okay. Jim, you will be first.
I vote for Alice Broadway and Leon Reed.
Al.
I do have to say, I think we have 6 qualified candidates, and as Carlos already said, I hope you know how much we appreciate you putting it out there and going to the trouble to apply and to be here tonight, and I have a high degree of respect for all 6 of you. Based upon what I've learned from this board and getting to know the board, and what I feel like what our needs are, all of you are qualified, but for the fit, I do believe that Alice Broadway and Sylvan Hershey would be strong additions to our board.
Carrie.
Because you did, I'm also, because I wrote it down, it's important. This process that you all have put yourself through, I am appreciative of the time, commitment to prepare, to be here. This is a really tough decision, and I am grateful that you all have stepped forward to be a part of this. I would like to cast my votes for Sylvan, Hershey, and Alice Broadway.
Okay, Mike?
I would echo the same comments of Al and Carrie. Really qualified candidates, and my 2 votes would be Sylvan Hershey and Leon Reed.
Ken?
I'm not going to reiterate what everyone else said. I would agree to. I would say one of the candidates who couldn't be here comes with an impeccable record, and would love to support him. But personally, I'd like to see somebody here. I'd like to see him have to stand at the podium like everybody else. That's not to take away from any of his qualifications. Having said that, Alice Broadway would be my first selection, and Leon Reed would be the second.
And let's see, that leaves me, okay? I will not make comments again, I've already done that. I cast my votes, Sylvan Hershey and Roberta Cook. I calculate 12 votes. I see, if I'm correct, Mr. Hershey has 4, and Alice Broadway with 4. Did I get that correct? Those two candidates having 4 votes. They are duly elected to the board. Again, I thank the other ones. There's no other action, right?
Well, what I would do, just out of an overabundance of caution,
Okay.
is treat those as being nominees now on the floor, that you now have these 2 individuals nominated, and then I would have a voice vote as to these 2.
And that would be a yes or a no? Okay. There has to be a motion.
I would like to make a motion that Sylvan Hershey and Alice Broadway become members of our school board.
Okay. That they're appointed.
Appointed to the board.
I would just question, would not be all or nothing, that each of them come up individually for the vote.
So I think we need a second on the motion, so I second.
Well, they're already nominated, so you really,
Yeah.
I think if you want to vote on each individual, you can. So then,
We have a motion for the 2. Is there a second?
Second, so we can even discuss it.
Okay. Now there's any
I would
discussion?
ask that it be separated, not lumped as a vote yes or no for both of them, but individually for each of them. Just a procedure.
We would need a second on that, I think, to do that.
What? Is he making,
To amend the motion.
we have a motion and it was second.
Right.
We have discussion.
and
It's not, this is a procedural thing. I already stated my concern. Leave the motion as it is, but I'll
Okay?
okay, so you're withdrawing your objection.
That's correct.
All right. We will vote. Al?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes?
Mike?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And the only other observation is that Mr. Hershey apparently is not going to be able to take an oath and join the board within 10 days of today's date. And really, it doesn't take any board action. It's just that the school code says if a person doesn't do that within 10 days, the board may then declare a vacancy. And I just think it's understood, and should be on the record that it's understood that he's not capable of doing that. The board understands that, and he'll be able to do it after 10 days.
Okay, I think that's understood. All right, I guess at this point, Alice, you come forward, please. As it was stated earlier, you'll be sworn in, and you'll be able to join us up here for the remainder of the meeting.
I state your name.
I, Alice Bradley,
solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties
and that I will discharge the duties
of my office with fidelity.
of my office with fidelity.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Welcome, Alice. And we are now going to take a 5-minute break, recess, and then we will come back and conclude the meeting.